I tell folks that I'm so old I helped Noah do some shoveling while on the ark. And when Moses broke the tablets, who do you think had to sweep up that mess? This is holy stuff, you know. You just can't throw it in the trash bin. Proper disposal is mandatory. What it means for today is that I guess I'm better than average at recognizing a good, gentle person when I see one, whether in person or on the screen. James Wright of Wood by Wright, I feel, is such a person. A decent gentleman who likes to learn and then share that learning with others, and along the way earn $1 or $2. So when James the Wright suggested building this bread knife, I thought I would give it a try. Just as in the shop there is never enough clamps, in the kitchen there is never enough kitchen knives. So let's do a talk about it as I try my own rendition of the Wright bread knife. Hello anyone, I'm Scott Bain. They call me the Old Farmer. Welcome to the 200th episode of Old Farmer. We started uploading videos in October 2019 and turned the channel on at noon January 1st, 2020. Considering that we're not doing anything trending or clickbait, we're doing pretty good. Maybe YouTube may think we're just plodding along. We aren't. We are trying to be honest and as accurate as possible, and as we said, without any gimmicks. So now let's continue with the 200th episode of The Old Farmer. And by the way, thank you to all of you for just being here. Now on with the show. The way most knives are made today, it's harder than it should be to cut a straight line in sandwich bread, or for that matter, fruits, vegetables, and meats. So a knife with a built-in jig just might help make the perfect slice of bread so that the perfect sandwich can be made. In comes James Wright, demonstrating the making of a simple bread knife. I thought I would give it a try. I first wanted to make a prototype, so I grabbed a piece of recycled wood. The wood I used came from a 40-year-old chest that I made. The planking was actually a true 1x piece of wood that is actually 1 inch thick. That's right, an actual 1 inch thick piece of wood, not dimensional wood. Maybe I shouldn't have used this wood because it's white ash that has been inside for 40 or so years. I think it's safe to say the wood has been cured. Whereas I had a simple piece of maple sitting to the left of this piece of ash. Maybe I should have used the maple instead. I ordered in a set of blades that James used. He provided a link for the blades. The blades promptly came and sat on the shelf for about 8 months. I sketched a sketch, and then I cut a jig for cutting the form. I used a table saw to cut the square dimensions. I used the poor man's bandsaw, a scroll saw, to rough cut to shape. That ash was a hard cut. The scroll saw had enough power, it was the blade that was the problem. So I put on a new blade that was for hardwoods. It went a bit easier. I wanted to do the final cut and trim to size using my shaper, a fancy router table. Again, the tool had the power, the problem was the router bit. The wood was just too hard to do a clean cut, even with all the proper bracing to do the routing. The wood jumped around and was not safe to continue this way. I went back to the scroll saw to do the fine-tuned cutting. Then it was on to the oscillating sander to edge to the line. I decided at the handle end to do a recess, partly for looks and partly because I had made the tip end a bit too short. The blade would have been crooked, so I cut by hand to the depth needed. And then I came in with a router plane to trim to depth. I do like this router plane. Some may think I'm cheating when I use power tools. It's the same philosophy that I have when cooking in the kitchen. If you can't tell with an end product that you took a shortcut, I take the shortcut. As long as the finished product looks like I used only hand tools, at my age I'll use power tools. But to give a handmade look, I used the router plane to create the recess. I think it would have shown if power tools were used, and besides, the wood was fighting me every step of the way. Most times it's safer to use hand tools over power tools. Remember, I wanted to make a prototype. I wanted to see how the knife would work before I used a new piece of wood. In fact, you can see the holes where the wood had pegs to hold two adjoining boards together. I used a spoke shave to form the handle and came out with the intended oval handle that made for a good grip for controlling the knife. I took my time using power sanding and then hand sanding to finish the project. I have a box of miniature brass screws, so I drilled the 0.07-inch hole needed for the screws after marking where the hole should be. I used softened beeswax as the finish, knowing it will naturally darken and look like it had been stained or dyed. I think I used 3 coats with it drying between coats. I attached the blade, making sure there was tension on the blade because it felt like a mighty thin blade to me, about 1/3 of the thickness of a hacksaw blade. Now to the bread slicing. I used a thick cutting board so that I could slice below the actual bread. The blade is extremely sharp. It goes through bread almost like butter. Well, no, actually, the knife goes through bread like it's going through butter, not the bread going through butter. But I believe the blade is stretching, and as you can see, there is now a bow in the blade. About every other cut is uneven, no matter how I aim the knife, because the blade is being stretched. I dropped an email to James Wright about his experiences with his knife. He says he uses it all the time and he likes it. He thinks the blades he got were thicker than the ones I got, even though I used his link to get the blades. Here is an update from the future. I did all this off camera. I made the marks for drilling the screw holes originally with a sharp pencil. This time I used an ice pick to make the mark and used the pick to leverage more tension on the blade. Now it's as it should be. There is proper tension and the blade is as tight as it can be. So if you're going to make one of these knives, my suggestion is to drill the hole first and screw down the blade, but only one side. Then use something like an ice pick or a nail so that you can draw up the tension. I put a bit of an angle on the second hole so as I tighten down the screw, it will draw the blade a little tighter. I am now happy with the way the knife works. Jim Wright was right. Before we go, it's important to quickly mention for all who are visiting to subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, and share with friends and family. Now for the most important part. Thank you to those who have subscribed. Thank you. And yes, thank you to those who are visiting. We value you too. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers so that we may receive a pittance from YouTube to cover expenses. We replaced one camera, tripod, and bought a water-cooled editor for video production, plus all the tools we review. So if you could help us reach that 1,000 subscription point, thank you. Well, this is the old farmer Scott Boehm. Be well, be safe, and be kind to someone.
Don't forget to click like and click subscribe on the Old Farmer YouTube channel. And thanks again for watching. Bye.
the VFW National Home for Children, providing families of veterans and active duty military opportunities for growth and development in a nurturing community. Please consider a donation to help their children and families. I.C. Rhodes speaking.